Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much to the team at the conference for the invitation. You're obviously very brave inviting me. Brexit. We as an organisation lobbied very, very hard against Brexit. We worked at it for months and we got a result. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes going through what is essentially Donald Rumsfeld territory. There are known knowns, there are known unknowns, there are unknown knowns, and there are unknown unknowns, none of which we have yet crystallized. So, continued growth depends on the trade deal we negotiate with Europe, replicating the trade deal with the rest of the world with adequate underpinning resources. London is very short of resources, not unreasonably. For the last 43 years, agri-food policy has been written in Europe and it has merely been enacted in the UK. That has led to a withering of the resources in London, and that's a situation that now needs to be put into reverse. There's a huge impact on cross-border trade, and I could spend a long time talking about it. Suffice it to say that the biggest indigenous industry in the Republic of Ireland is agri-food, and its main market is export, and the situation in Northern Ireland is identical. And also, just for my colleagues in Board BIA, for whom I have the highest regard, and my congratulations from this platform to Aidan Cotter on his impending retirement, a man I've worked with for many years. Since the recession, Northern Ireland agri-food is up 50%. So it's the same story. Tremendous expansion since the recession. What is the UK policy on agriculture going to be? It is going to affect everybody in these islands. And there is a real danger that the voices in the City of London will overrule the agri-food lobby. And we needn't kid ourselves that it's any other way. I spent 3 days last week in Westminster. We have a serious piece of work to do to convince Westminster that agri-food is worth continuing investing in. I think our colleagues in Ireland have a seminal role to play in that discussion. Access to labour and, as you touched on, common standards are obviously going to be critical. Okay. The Northern Ireland food and drink industry looks like that. And I'm not going to bore you and read out the slide, but 100,000 jobs in total in Northern Ireland depend on agri-food. That's about a fifth of our entire private sector. That's about 30% of our entire manufacturing industry, and it has been growing strongly. So this is hugely important to Northern Ireland. Dare I say, it possibly is even more significant to Northern Ireland pro rata than the Republic of Ireland. So, what are the options? Let me see, yeah. Just before I touch on the options, where are we? The UK puts 8.5 billion in. It's got trade agreements with 53 other countries. What are we facing? A lovely set of tariffs. If you listen to some of the speakers earlier, you'll have heard a figure that net margin for most food manufacturers is in the region of 3%, give or take. According to the government statistics for Northern Ireland, we're currently at 2.7. So any tariff that starts to go beyond those sort of numbers is untenable for food and drink manufacturers. In the case of flour, which is an interesting one for this island, an industry that I used to work in, the WTO tariff for flour is over 60%. So there are some huge problems up ahead. So what are the options? You'll have heard the Canada option, the Turkish option, the Swiss option, the Norway option. Essentially, they are all on a continuum from more regulatory autonomy or more trade cost. So the more that the UK wants to do its own thing, the higher the tariffs. That's it in a nutshell. So we, to use a colloquialism that might catch your attention, we're into more than 50 shades of grey here. If we go with the Norway option, free trade, we have to accept free movement of people, and we have to contribute to the EU budget. That sounds pretty politically unacceptable to me in the current UK environment. Swiss option, we need multiple free trade agreements. I believe it took them over 9 years to negotiate them. Again, we're stuck with an EU contribution, and again, free movement. Turkish option, free movement, low EU contribution, that's good. Must cooperate, same tariffs as EU. US, Canada, the longest one to negotiate. Who knows how long that would take to negotiate and how many people. Very technically difficult. Okay. So now we've talked about the known unknowns. The WTO option, the worst of all possible scenarios. Huge tariffs, very, very difficult to see how that could be put in without effectively decommissioning a lot of the industry on these islands. So we need freer access to the European market, but it's linked to contribution to the budget and free movement of people, both of which are red line issues for the current politics of Westminster. If exit is seen as a success, it may encourage others. And the economies on this island and east-west in these islands are mutually codependent. The balance of trade in food between the UK and Ireland is broadly neutral. It's slightly in Ireland's favour, although that may reverse with currency. Essentially, cornflakes and baked beans comes this way, and beef and dairy goes the other. Another way to look at it is, over the last 40 years, commerce has sorted out who does what within these islands. Natural commercial competition. If government steps into that arena, it will begin to distort what commerce has done. Okay, EU's taking 62% of our output, allow tariff-free access without contribution to CAP. Will the UK retaliate with tariffs? If those of you who have been reading the news today will see that the EU is turning up its rhetoric, saying that there will be no agreement without free movement. Not a chance. Hugely important numbers. The percentages are just vast. And if we end up with WTO on 42%, again, I would contend that that is just going to cause huge change throughout the industry. And it's going to drive food inflation. And food inflation, the last time I checked, is not a vote winner for politicians. So, we're not good at explaining why our industry is unique. We start with an animal, whether it's got 2 legs or 4 legs. We dismantle it. We choose to eat the bits that we like, which in these islands is not very much of it. We're quite picky, and the rest of it has to get sent somewhere else to some other people on the planet who would like to eat that bit of it. And the trick in the game is to sell all of it. And only when you've sold all of it do you actually know what the animal was worth in the first place. What I'm trying to illustrate is just how complex food and drink is and how impacted it is going to be. So, for example, at the minute, in Turkey, they cannot tan sheep hides to go into Russia. That has had a knockback impact on the value of sheep meat back to farmers. Access to global markets is critical to make the sums work. So, UK will no longer be a party to those agreements. Tariffs will restrict markets. product taken from Northern Ireland and processed in Europe, i.e. the Republic of Ireland, will be excluded from the 53 trade agreements. 40% of Northern Ireland's milk output is processed in the Republic of Ireland. You might want to have a think about that one. And the vast majority of Northern Ireland lambs are actually processed in the Republic of Ireland. Back to my point of the Northern Ireland food and drink industry, the Republic of Ireland food and drink industry are effectively joined at the hip. Oops, sorry. Okay, future trade agreements. We need to negotiate and accept mutually lower tariffs with third countries. The UK is making noises about the Commonwealth. Do we really want to see New Zealand lamb all over the UK market? Well, I can tell you the Welsh lamb farmers aren't particularly ecstatic for a start. And what about TTIP with the UK only? What about Brazilian beef? Brazilian beef is currently trading, give or take, my friends on board BIA probably know this better than me, somewhere between 35 to 40% of our costs. Effectively, it would completely undermine the red meat market in the UK if it came in volume. That would affect the Scotch, the Welsh, the Northern Irish, and the Irish hugely. And it's very appealing for politicians. Cheap food. What a clever politician am I. Okay, I've summarized it there for you, and this time I'm going to let you read it for yourself. The point is, there are a huge and very complex set of issues around this, and there are relatively few people who actually understand the interconnectivity, the complexity, and just how tricky this will be to get to a resolution. So what do we go from here? Well, if there's no deal, we're in WTO. Worst possible case. Huge tariffs, huge problems, and those problems will affect everybody. They will affect us, they will affect Scotch, Welsh, Irish, Republic of Ireland, everybody. And again, you can see for yourself, I'm going to keep going because I can see John looking at me through these slides. If we do rest of the world trade deals, we've got a big problem with Europe. And we open the door to third-party food coming into the GB market. As we open that door, there is almost nothing that we are producing inside these islands that you cannot access cheaper outside these islands. And there's a very good reason for that. We have a basket of very high standards, including Origin Green, which is an excellent initiative, our national living wages, our animal welfare standards, our environmental standards, our safety standards, all of those cost money. So there are very good reasons why food produced inside these islands is dearer than food produced in other regions, never mind the fact that the scale is generally smaller. So, DEFRA, which is the department tasked with market access and negotiating this, has one member of staff currently on market access. We need to get our Northern Ireland marketing body up and running, aligned with the target markets, a point I'm going to come back to. And we need to support investment in processing. If we are going to have to restructure our agri-food industry as a result of this, government needs to get behind the industry. This is not an industry-created dynamic. This is a politically created dynamic, changing a marketplace. Access to labour. Foreign nationals, I think everybody in the food industry in this room is using foreign national labour. But in addition to that issue, we've got cross-border movement. There are a huge number of people based in the Republic working in the north and vice versa. So the free movement of people without controls is a critical issue. And I've sort of left the elephant in the room out, which is CAP. Farming is currently unprofitable without government support. So if we don't continue to put in the government support, what are farmers going to do? I'd make one other interesting point on that. Common agricultural policy payments in the United Kingdom are devolved, which means that the Scottish Department of Agriculture, the Welsh Department of Agriculture, the Northern Irish Department of Agriculture, and the English Department of Agriculture can choose how they split Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 of CAP, for those of you who understand the terminology. What that means is all the farmers in the United Kingdom are not getting the same amount of money. It depends how it's been split between the pillars. So, the situation is fluid, lots and lots of unknowns. I've scalped through them. And from our point of view, our government needs to be engaged in this. And I'm not sure if you've picked up, but our First Minister wrote a letter flagging up that agri-food was seriously threatened by Brexit and needed to be considered very, very carefully. So, having whizzed through all of that, the Rumsfeld stuff, where are we? Well, are you an optimist or a pessimist? We're either about to walk into a minefield or a new dawn. If those of us in this room keep saying it's a minefield, it is going to become a minefield, because our politicians will make it a minefield. We have got to change the mindset that this is an opportunity to reset the agri-food policy within these islands and the vision for agri-food within these islands. Ireland is a key part of the United Kingdom's food security. I cannot see that changing in the near term unless we get some very poor decision making. Market forces have changed in recent years. This is McDonald's, a very respected customer of our produce and a very professional marketing organisation. In Ireland, the beef in its beef burgers is all Irish. In Britain, it's British and Irish. I use this to illustrate that we are beginning to break up the markets. We have got 5 organisations, and I'm going to come on to Northern Ireland's one in a minute. And I make this point to you. Bord Bia, who is the best resourced, and I'd have to say the most professional of those organisations, spends taxpayers' money to support the Irish food industry. DEFRA is now spending money supporting the GB food industry. James Withers, who was on this platform earlier, a good colleague of mine, is supporting Scotland Food and Drink, and the Welsh are building their organisation. Our First Minister announced that we're about to set up an organisation as well. We're all spending taxpayers' money knocking the tripe out of each other within these islands. That doesn't sound to me like a hugely successful use of taxpayers' money. And in case you aren't aware of it, this is what DEFRA are currently getting into. The Secretary of State for DEFRA is determined to cement Britain's reputation as a global food nation. The Taoiseach and the PM have already said that there should be much closer cooperation between Britain and Ireland. They went on to say that that should be in agri-food. I would contend that Brexit is a huge opportunity for us to look at that and deliver more for our respective industries. Thank you very much for listening.